Welcome to talkSPORT Driving, our dedicated motorsports YouTube channel. If you haven't already, make sure you hit subscribe and hit that little bell as well to get notifications of brand new videos coming on this channel. As we approach the end of the Formula One season, don't worry, motorsports will continue over the winter break with the start of the Formula E season, Season 11. Things are starting to get really interesting. We've got a brand new car, the Gen 3 Evo car. We've got brand new races, and we're going back to starting in December, meaning that we have racing over the Christmas period, or at least before the Christmas period. One of the big bits of news is you'll be able to watch this race, watch this season on ITV's digital channels, which is great. It means you won't have to pay to watch the races. And also you can listen to selected races on the talkSPORT network as well. So that's going to be huge this year with details of which races you can listen to on the way. All you need to know is that from 5 p.m. on Saturday, you'll be able to listen to the season opener from Sao Paulo. Now, on that, we had some big news last week, and that is that Nicki Shields will become the lead anchor for Formula E this year on ITV and TNT. And Nicki is joining me right now to celebrate this news. I know you've probably already celebrated with friends and family. However, this is your kind of talkSPORT celebration. It's a really big achievement because you've been involved forever and you've always been there. And I don't think there's a better choice for someone that just knows everything about Formula E.
Oh, that's really kind, John. And I think you've actually pointed out something very important. Mum and Dad, if you are listening, we have not celebrated this. I haven't really celebrated with it. You know what life is like. It's incredibly busy all of the time. I feel like, you're exactly the same as me, John. We work in this crazy world. We're always bouncing from one thing to the next. And there never really is a moment to just take stock and actually go, let's enjoy this moment. So thank you. I am super excited, having been involved in Formula E as the pit lane reporter since the very early days. 2014 was when we first started. Yes, that is 10 years ago. Yes, I do look older and not much wiser for it. But it has been a whirlwind journey, doing, all sorts of things, which I'm sure we're going to go into details of. But basically have pretty much been at all of the races, bar a couple, when I popped out 3 babies along the way. So
I was going to say, this is the next thing I wanted to talk about, because actually in your post where you announced that you were going to become the lead anchor, you put a line in there about the fact that it proves that you can have a family and travel the world doing your dream job. How tough has that actually been? Because, we were at an event a couple of years ago in London and baby Orlando was there and everyone was obsessed with Orlando. And then you've since had another child and it just seems like you just take it all in your stride. How difficult really is it? Because obviously you put on a very chilled and comfortable face while I'm sure chaos is going on behind the scenes.
Absolute chaos. Oh my God, of course. I mean, I was away this weekend doing F1 Academy, got back, my husband is amazing, and he's very hands-on, mainly because he's had to be. I've thrown him in the deep end. But we do have extra help at the weekend. And I mean, it came home and it was like a hurricane had come through the house. It was like, what is going on? And then obviously you have to crack on and go to work today. So it is full on. The juggle is very much real. But I have a great support network. My parents, they always look after the kids on a Friday, and I can always call on them if, the kids are sick or for whatever emergency, they're always around to help. Then we do have after school help. We've got my husband who's on board. I honestly spend more time juggling the childcare than the actual children. I mean, okay, that's maybe a bit unfair, but it does take a huge amount of organization. It's not easy. And obviously you feel huge elements of guilt when you're not always around. But then when I am around, it's lovely. So, when I'm not traveling, I'm there doing school drop-offs, school pickups, obviously bedtimes and all the normal things that you do as a parent. So it's lovely. You try and get the best of both worlds. And I think it's just, kids have just grown up knowing that mummy goes away. It's kind of ironic. They always say mummy's going away to the noisy weights cars. Little do they know that they're not that noisy, but in their eyes, they're very new. And they get to do cute things. Like I call them when they're having their breakfast, and when we were at testing, I'm showing them the cars on track, give them a garage tour. Arthur's asking about the battery technology and what this person does and that person does. So, there are some perks for that.
Some potential racers then in the future. You could become the first host to also have... Oh, okay, maybe not then. You mentioned...
I don't know whether you've noticed, John, but I am not a multimillionaire.
But you're a multitasking millionaire, like in terms of how well you multitask. You have that huge value.
But, yeah, unless he wants to go find funding for his own karting career, that's not happening.
Okay, fine. Well, we'll worry about that in a few years. You mentioned the F1 Academy, and obviously, having watched Abbi Pulling be involved in many different championships, including the all-female test recently in Madrid, you must be quite proud to see what she's done, because she's absolutely smashed it, and looking forward to seeing what she can do in GB3 next year, which was part of the prize funded by Rodin, who I know back her and have backed her for a little while now, and she's stepping up again.
I think you've nailed it there. She absolutely smashed it. And okay, obviously in F1 Academy, there are 16 drivers, including the wildcard driver. And you always want it to be tight. But at the same time, this season, there has been a clear winner. But she had a massive points gap. And actually, that's just brilliant to see that the pedigree of Abbi Pulling is just a step above the rest. And you know that she is going to go on and have an awesome career in single-seaters. I really hope she does, because it's not easy to get a seat. It's not easy to get funding. Just because she's won this title doesn't mean that her career is sorted for the rest of time. It means she has won this seat in GB3, which is brilliant. So she can kind of relax for a year, but she's got to show up. She's got to prove herself. She's then got to win sponsorship. She's got to win another race seat for the following year. But I am very, very excited to see what Abbi Pulling can do. She was the first female as well to win a British F4 race. So it's an exciting time for female racers.
Yeah, well, let's talk about the female test then while we're on the subject of it, because Abbi was certainly very, very impressive there alongside Jamie Chadwick and Bianca Bustamante and all the other female drivers that competed. It was quite a momentous occasion, given that they were driving the same cars that the drivers that have done thousands of laps in just jumped out of, and they just jump in. It's a kind of a groundbreaking moment, and you're obviously a huge part of that.
Yeah, a real moment in history, to bring some of the best, most elite female racers together to race in a Formula E car together was a really, really special achievement as well from Formula E. And again, they're not necessarily next season going to be racing in Formula E, but that's not the point. And I think sometimes people might miss the point of this. The point is it opens opportunities. You make connections, you get experience. You meet one person at a test like this and it might open a new door. And also it's that, role models. It's like the next generation. Okay, the next generation can see, maybe I could go and test a Formula E car. That's what we need. That's what we need to get more female registrations. So, are we going to see Abbi Pulling racing in Formula E next season? Possibly not, but it might happen. And it's just it's a way to open opportunities. And I think that's the most critical and important thing here.
Yeah, well, we're going to obviously see more, I'm sure, from the female drivers involved in Formula E, and hopefully we'll have another female driver on the grid very, very soon. And if it's Abbi Pulling, then fantastic for the British fans. Absolutely. I know that she impressed a lot of people with Nissan. We're going to talk about this season in just a second, but before we move on, as you have been around Formula E for so long, do you have a couple of sort of favourite moments? Maybe, it doesn't need to be a huge achievement from anyone on track. It might not be, a world championship win. It might be something funny that's happened from behind the scenes, but can you give us an insight into something that's happened that you will never forget from your travels in the world of Formula E?
Tell you what we'll never forget is the first race of Formula E. No one really knew if it was actually going to happen or not. No one really knew if the cars were going to start on track because of temperature issues, battery uncertainty. They hadn't done a huge amount of testing. And then once that actually did happen, the race started. We had huge technical issues from a TV perspective. But again, that got underway. We were televised. We were on it. It was going great guns. Then there was an almighty accident, final corner, final lap, where Nick Heidfeld kind of pirouetted into the sky as he collided with Nico Prost and smashed into the barriers. Everyone thought he died because it was a massive, massive hit. Luckily, he just walked away. It was quite amazing, hit the BBC News. But it was my job to obviously go and interview him. So I ran down the pit lane, trying to find Nick. Nick Heidfeld was feeling really quite nervous about the whole thing because at this point we didn't really know how he was. Obviously, it was a huge moment. It shook, it sent shockwaves through the paddock because, you never want to see that happen to anybody. Even though he was okay, it was still terrifying. And then we were on air and I just heard this 3, 2, and then all of my comms went dead as I was supposed to start the interview. It was just really hope it's still working. So we did the interview. I sort of had to elbow out half the other journalists there because as the host feed, we have priority, but obviously everyone wanted a word with him. We did this interview. I threw back to Jack in commentary, having had no idea whether it had been broadcast and whether it had worked or not, because I'd lost comms with the director and with the producer. But that was our kind of one shot of the interview. So then I had to kind of like run back to the TV compound and was like, did you get it? I've lost comms. Like, did it all work? Unfortunately, it did. So it did go to air. But it was a sort of funny touch and go moment where the most important interview that we were doing that weekend may not have worked.
Yeah,
but it did.
Close call. That was a big moment though, wasn't it?
Call.
Because obviously the new series, the new championship, and then something like that happens. That could have been that. I mean, if Nick had been seriously injured or worse, Formula E probably wouldn't exist now because, I mean, there would have been a lot of pressure to go, no, sorry, not safe.
Totally, absolutely. And, again, massive credit to the team and, for ensuring that the car had a halo and, all of these things. But in a way, it then was this kind of showcase to the drivers that this was a very safe race car and gave them confidence to come into the following race. But it was not the way we wanted Formula E to hit the headlines, but it did. It did do it for it.
Absolutely. Well, look, let's look forward now. Because we have a new season starting now. It's the 11th season of Formula E. As you say, we've just celebrated 10 years. Gen 3 Evo car. First of all, is that the car that you tried recently? Because I believe you and Tom and I can't remember who else it was, tried the car recently. But that's one of the perks of the job, right?
We did drive the car. It was not the Evo. I would have loved it to have been. But it was still the Gen 3 car, which was amazing. Although they did slightly reduce our power.
Oh.
Which, yeah, I know. They didn't quite trust us with the full power that the drivers get. So you can easily do that. You can kind of change the power map settings. But apart from that, it was amazing. And it was great to actually just get a sense of what these drivers do on a weekly, daily basis and just experience driving sort of full throttle in Berlin. And it was myself and Tom Brooks did it as well. Tom being quite the avid go-karter. So he was quite competitive, shall we say.
Tom's offered me some kind of track day in one of his cars around one of the circuits in the UK. So he's obviously got previous experience here. So I can imagine him being fairly competitive.
Well, watch out. Yeah. He's invited you on a track day to show off.
Of course he is.
He's not invited you on a track day to lose.
No, of course not. I mean, no driver likes to lose. When we actually look at Usain Bolt was in the car, the first race of season 10, and he was in the car in Mexico, and he put his foot down and very nearly put that car into the wall, didn't he? So he's not used to the power that you get straight away.
Mm-hmm.
For people that drive electric cars, and obviously, you review a lot of electric cars. I enjoy watching you talking about cars. And actually, you helped me buy a new Cupra. So thank you very much. I know it's a sort of weird place to tell you that, but thank you very much.
Oh, did you go for it? Right. Yes.
Yeah.
Oh, good.
Yeah. It actually arrives just after I get back from Sao Paulo next week. So there we go. I mean, we'll do a review or something like that. I don't know. But when we look at this new Gen 3 Evo car, off the line, we now have 4-wheel drive, which is even more of a game changer, along with the softer tyres, which I know the drivers have been campaigning for. And obviously that 4-wheel drive will be used in attack mode and in qualifying duels as well. So it really is a step up, this car, because we see the headlines, we see the 1.82 seconds to 60 miles an hour, we see a third faster accelerator than a Formula One car. But I think until we actually see these cars racing each other to see what it makes of the spectacle of these battles, I can't wait until Saturday evening, it will be in the UK, to watch these guys race for the first time, because it really is an unknown at this point.
Totally. And I think I'm so used to hearing drivers moaning and complaining about the car. Oh, it's not this, it's not that. Oh, it hasn't got this, it hasn't got that. But when we went testing in Madrid recently, I'd say it was a pretty different reaction. They all jumped out of the car like, wow, this is amazing. Like quite taken aback at the step up in terms of performance, because it's okay. It's all these little incremental things that add to a big change. So, I mean, things like, top speed being 200 miles an hour. Yeah, it sounds great. But ultimately, how often can you get up to 200 miles an hour on a tight, twisty street circuit? But when it comes down to the acceleration and the better handling and, more better power in the all-wheel drive. It's just, I think all of these little elements is going to make the racing really quite special. And I think people are going to hopefully be blown away by it in that first race.
I think they will. I'm waiting to see the inevitable battle between Jake Dennis and Pascal Wehrlein, because they always seem to find each other on the track. Jake has said before that Pascal will finish second last if it means that Jake Dennis finishes last. I don't know whether that's a bit of an exaggeration. However, they always seem to find each other. And it's funny that they were the first two champions of this Gen 3 era. Jake Dennis was the first champion. Pascal Wehrlein won the championship in London, and he is now the reigning champion coming into this season. Who do you expect to be a challenger this year? Because we've seen a lot of drivers come close and maybe have some bad luck. Oliver Rowland is a great example of this. He got back with Nissan. He had an incident at Mazzano where they didn't quite have enough power because of a miscalculation, a bit of a system failure. Then he missed 2 races in Portland. But if he hadn't had those problems, then he would have been very much in the mix. And personally, I think Oliver Rowland will have a pretty good fight this year. But, you've been around a little bit more than I have. Who do you think's the driver or drivers we should be watching for this year?
You cannot ignore the Jaguar boys. They will have so much fire in their belly to win. And I don't think we're going to see them, pick any race. I think over the course of a season, it kind of ebbs and flows. There are times when a driver will come in and just be so focused that they've got to win. And then there are other times that maybe they're a little bit more relaxed on their approach. They still want a good result. Don't get me wrong. A driver wants to win. But I think with the Jaguar boys having both narrowly missed out on that Drivers' Championship, they have their sights on one thing only. And they're not going to get caught up in what each other are doing. They're not going to let anything get in their way. So keep an eye out for Mitch Evans and Nick Cassidy. And also I think it's going to be really interesting, their kind of inter-team relationship, how that's going to play out. Because, they've always been great friends beforehand. I'm not sure whether what happened in London has been patched up yet. Unfortunately, whoever was to blame, but one of them really should have taken home that Drivers' Championship title. They had each other. They could have backed each other. They should have supported each other, but it didn't go to plan. They worked against each other, and Pascal Wehrlein benefited. So I think their relationship's going to be an interesting thing to watch. And then the other big thing, Kiro, who are sort of come out of nowhere. They're running a Porsche powertrain. They've got Dan Tickton, he's been around for a few years now. It was the old Neo 333, and new driver David Beckman. And they did a great job in testing. So I am excited. We've got a new team in the mix at the top.
They're one of the smaller teams that have had a bit of a backing injection. So now they're technically an American team. They've got a car that, if you're a new fan to Formula E watching on ITV this season, I think it's going to stand out even more than the McLaren stood out in the last couple of years. So I think a lot of people will be picking Kiro as their favourite team just because they're easier to spot, which is how I got into motorsport when I was very little, and the Jordan was a yellow car, and I was like, well, I'll just support the yellow car. But they confirmed that news that Dan Tickton and David Beckman will be driving just earlier today, speaking on Monday of race week. And I think they're a really big unknown, and I think we were quite surprised by what they did in testing, which is exciting to see. One driver I think that has possibly a really good season ahead is Nico Müller, who's moved on from Abt Cooper as it was last year, and he's now Jake Dennis's teammate at Andretti. And I think he's going to be Jake's sort of biggest challenger in terms of a teammate pushing him that he's had for quite a few years now, isn't he?
Yeah. And, I think Jake is obviously, he's been at the team for so many years now. Is he number one driver? Yes, probably to start with. And I think Nico Müller will understand that and respect that, and that won't bother him. I think with some drivers that would bother them. They want to come in and they want to be seen as number one. Whereas Nico Müller will respect what Jake has done in the past with the team. And be a support rather than someone who's going to come up against him, which again is going to play into things because those sort of inter-team relationships are really important. We saw it with Jean-Eric Vergne and Antonio Felix da Costa, a few seasons ago when Antonio Felix da Costa managed to get the title, but their inter-team battle was seriously tooth and nail at one point. They almost took each other out, but eventually ended up sort of working together. kind of.
Reminds me of Sam Bird versus Mitch Evans in the Jaguar in season 9, where Sam did unfortunately take Mitch out a couple of times. And this takes me on to my final question, because we've got to leave it here, but I'm obviously excited to bring you coverage this weekend, and people will be watching on ITV to your coverage as well, I'm sure, Nicki. When it comes to Sam Bird, he's a big favourite here at talkSPORT. He always comes on, he's always chatting about Manchester United, he's bigging up the fact he's friends with, you know, the Newcastle United manager Eddie Howe. Sam Bird won a race in every season and then had a couple of seasons where he didn't win a race. However, last season, it was where we are this weekend, Sao Paulo, Brazil, where he kind of returned to glory. A real kind of, I don't know what the term is, but he made the most of an opportunity. He saw two people fighting ahead of him. They pushed each other wide. He came through for the victory. And it was a huge moment for Sam, and it was a lot of a weight off his shoulders. And he was over the moon. Do you think Sam Bird can replicate the success this weekend in Sao Paulo? And more importantly, is this the year that we finally see Sam Bird win the championship? Because we've seen other originals like Lucas de Grassi, who won the first ever race that we've talked about already. He was the world champion. We've talked about Antonio Felix da Costa, Jean-Eric Vergne, all these kind of guys that have been around for years. Can Sam finally do it? Because, you know, he's got a young challenger now, and I know he wants to beat Taylor Barnard.
Absolutely. And I think the answer to that is, why not? Of course he can. Sam has got all the experience. He's got the performance. You know, he did have a few tricky seasons in Formula E, but he was also going through a lot of personal things as well. Whereas I feel like now he's in a really good place psychologically. He's excited about the season ahead. He's got his new wingman, Taylor Barnard, who I think Sam will, you know, hopefully be there as a bit of a mentor, because Taylor is relatively young, but he did very well in the first, in the race that he covered for Sam Bird when Sam broke his hand. And I like to think that Sam won't be sort of threatened by Taylor Barnard, because, you know, in that instance, then it might cause a bit of uncertainty amongst the team. But I think Sam is in a great place, and I don't see any reason why he couldn't challenge for the title. It's always difficult to say, you know, from looking at the times in testing, we always say, well, it doesn't really mean anything because it's not really representative of a race. You know, they're just driving around in circles. Well, I suppose they do that in a race as well, but there's a lot more at play. There's a lot more strategy. You know, you've got to manage those tires. You've got to manage the battery. You've got to be able to save as much energy as possible whilst also driving fast. There's so much more going on in a race than there is at testing. So I think, why not? Go Sam Bird.
Put a big smile on Zach Brown's face. Incidentally, Sam Bird, this season 10, this year, 2024, he won a race for Neil McLaren, and then suddenly Lando Norris won his first race and Oscar Piastri won his first race. It felt like Sam's a bit of a pioneer. So with Lando Norris missing out on the Formula 1 World Championship, I feel like Sam will win the Formula E World Championship, and then I reckon Oscar Piastri is going to go and win the F1 Championship next year, and Sam can just be seen as this pioneer guy, and then obviously he'll mentor Taylor Barnard to the championship the year after. I don't know. I think I'm fantasy predicting things now.
Interesting you've gone for Oscar Piastri and not Lando Norris there. I'm intrigued by that one.
I think Oscar Piastri, having chatted to Oscar Piastri a couple of times, I think he's got the mentality. I think, you know, everyone thinks he's quite quiet. He's very dry. He's very serious. And everyone thinks Lando's a bit too nice. You know, I don't see Oscar Piastri being mates with Max Verstappen or anyone. Oscar Piastri is Oscar Piastri, and that's it. And I think that's the kind of mentality you need to be an F1 world champion. Maybe we'll talk about that another time. But for now, our time is done. Nicki, thank you very much for joining me. Of course, as I say, you can listen to the race at 5 p.m. on talkSPORT 2 on Saturday. And Nicki, you'll be bringing us qualifying practices live on ITV as well?
Good question.
I think some of them
I should know that, but I don't. But they are live on YouTube, I believe.
That's it. Practices on YouTube, qualifying in the race on one of the ITV channels. There we go. So the big news is that it's all free to air and it's free to listen to on talkSPORT 2. We're looking forward to another great season. Nicki, thank you very much. And we will see you, I'm sure, on and off throughout the season. Formula E returns this weekend in Sao Paulo, Brazil. We'll be there to bring you all the stuff from behind the scenes. So make sure you're subscribed to this channel and hit that little bell as well, because then you'll get a little notification every time I put up a video. And if you're lucky, there might be one with Nicki on it.